Hi, everyone. I would like to share with you some important reasons and why we should support issue 68. Although there are many to choose from, I would like you to hear from someone who benefits firsthand. Jubilee, can you tell us why you like your iPad?
Because I I can see my teacher and I can see my classmates and we can read together.
So issue 68 supports so many initiatives in CMSD, and we want to be sure to support our children to have a strong and successful future.
Good afternoon, and thank you for attending today's webinar, a community conversation regarding issue 68. I'm India Pierce Lee, Senior Vice President of Program at the Cleveland Foundation. Today's topic, issue 68, is a levy on the November ballot in support of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. The success or failure of this levy will have profound consequences for our students in the city for the next generation. At the Cleveland Foundation, education has been a grant-making priority for almost our entire history. Because of the central role education plays in determining an individual's and community's current and future well-being, in fact, the first public act of the foundation was to issue a 1917 report on the state of Cleveland Public Schools. More recently, if you took a look at the time period from 1991 to 2019, the foundation has awarded more than $263 million in grants to support early childhood education, K-12 education, higher education, and more recently, Say Yes to Education. We know the passage of issue 68 is absolutely critical in keeping our community moving forward. Past successes, like the Cleveland Plan for Transforming Schools, will be at great risk if the levy were to fail. Today, we'll have a number of panelists speaking to you on just how high the stakes are for the district and those it serves. Eric Gordon, CEO of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, will provide an operations overview of the levy, followed by remarks from Daryl Torbert, Vice President at Burgess & Burgess, strategist regarding the campaign. Finally, we'll have a facilitated discussion among nonprofit leaders about their connection to the district and why this levy is critical to those they serve. Our goal is to give you a firm understanding of issue 68, as well as ways you can support the campaign. We believe it is vital to stand up by our students, which have made tremendous gains in the last 10 years, and support the passage of issue 68. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask questions as we go. Thank you again for joining us today to hear about this important issue. And now I'm pleased to introduce Eric Gordon, our CEO of CMSD.
Thank you, India, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I want to take just a few minutes to briefly introduce CMSD's levy, issue 68. Katie, if we can. So we started this work in 2012, and you'll remember that we passed then issue 107 to implement the Cleveland Plan. At that time, CMSD was Ohio's lowest performing school district out of the 600 plus districts in the state. Today, we are one of the fastest improving school districts, although not where we want to be, with reading and math scores outpacing almost all districts in their growth, our third grade guarantee and literacy improvement among the top 12% in the state in growth, and graduation rates that are among the fastest growing in any school district in Ohio. And issue 68 protects and continues the investment in that work. This slide shows our four-year high school graduation rate compared to the state of Ohio. You can see that in 2011, just before we adopted the Cleveland Plan, the graduation rate in Cleveland was just over 50%, with the other 50% of students dropping out or not graduating on time, compared to a 78% graduation rate statewide. Over time, over the several years, you'll see that annually we have increased that graduation rate despite the changes in the criteria, and now stand at 80.1% with the last graduating class, almost completely closing the gap between the state average. That is a 27.9 percentage point gain, or over 53% increase since 2011 when we wrote the Cleveland Plan. Even more importantly, particularly for our community, CMSD's student population is 86% people of color, 68% African American, and about 17% Hispanic or Latinx. And you can see on this slide that CMSD's graduation rates for both Black and Latinx students far exceed the state average in blue, by over 5 to 5.5 points higher, meaning that students of color in our school district are graduating at higher rates than their peer group statewide. And that's really important, again, since the majority of our school district are children of color. The Cleveland Plan from the very beginning was different in its design. It was designed that we would put the whole community around our children. That's our families and caregivers. That's the mayor's office, county, and actually state support, in-school service providers, philanthropy, health and human service organizations, out-of-school providers, employers, and residents. From the very beginning, we were clear that this was not the Cleveland School District's plan, but this was Cleveland's plan to transform schools. And this remains an important community effort, really lifting up the African proverb of "it takes a village to raise a child." Some of the critical collaborations that we have designed and implemented throughout the course of the Cleveland Plan include Pre-for-CLE, our public-private partnership that has increased access to high-quality 3- and 4-year-old preschool education by over 75%. The Cleveland Transformation Alliance, our public-private partnership that ensures that we have oversight of all public schools in the city, represented by government, philanthropy, business, faith leaders, charter leaders, district leaders, parents, and many more. Our Say Yes to Education Cleveland effort, a $93 million scholarship program that is guaranteeing that every student who graduates, eligible student who graduates from a Cleveland high school can have a tuition-free trade school 2-year or 4-year college experience for the next 25 years, and that we have supports in place for those young people in grades kindergarten through 12th grade. 43 schools now have those supports, and we'll have all schools covered within the next 2 years. And of course, our Higher Education Compact of Greater Cleveland, actually one of our earliest efforts to make sure that we were focusing on creating not only a high school graduate population, but a college-going population, working with the 18 institutions that accept the largest number of students from CMSD. Just to set a little levy context, the first levy that we passed was Issue 107 in 2012. It was a 4-year levy for 15 mills of value and received 57% support. 14 of those mills went directly to CMSD, and 1 additional mill is distributed to partnering charter schools, making us the only school district in Ohio to share locally raised revenue. This was the first levy passed in over 16 years in Cleveland. And just for your information, 1 mill is 1/1000th of an assessed value of a property. And it's important, again, that it's assessed value, not sale value. In 2016, we had to renew that levy. We again renewed it as a 4-year, 15 mill levy, and voters approved it with 68% support. If we were to do nothing, that levy would expire on December 31st. And so doing nothing was simply not a choice, even in this pandemic, which is what brings us to Issue 68, which is on the ballot for 2020 in this November election that we started voting on Tuesday. So what is Issue 68? First, it is a renewal of that 15 mill levy with 1 mill shared with our partnering charter schools. It is also a small 5 mill increase with 1/2 mill shared with those partnering charter schools. The 15 mill renewal is approximately $66 million of the district's budget, or essentially 12% of our net operating budget. So this explains why we couldn't do nothing, is if we did nothing, we would lose 12% of our net operating budget just for inaction. This is the first increase in 8 years since 2012. This is really important because school district levies do not keep up with inflation. So the 15 mil levy collected $66 million annually in 2012, and it still collects $66 million annually in 2020 without any inflation, even though inflation has gone up about 1.8% per year over that time period. This levy is a longer duration so that we don't continue to have this 4-year cycle with this looming cliff, but that we're also still remaining accountable as a district to voters who get to renew their investment at their choosing, as opposed to a permanent levy that school districts and other entities have typically used in the past. And this levy costs the average homeowner, that's the median assessed home value in Cleveland, about $7 a month. So there's a lot of rhetoric in some opposition that this is an additional $90 million. That is simply an inaccurate statement. The $66 million is continuing. The additional millage would raise additional $7 per month for the average home in Cleveland. So why is the levy needed? Well, local property taxes have remained flat, and the district has not earned additional revenue from the levy, even though the inflation rate has increased by 1.7% annually. State funding has also remained flat since 2012. The district collects $31 million more in state funding today than it did in 2012, but it passes through to charter schools and vouchers $30.5 million, almost exactly the same amount, leaving us with a state funding that has been flat for 8 years. With no levy, we will have to immediately reduce the deficit of $30.5 million for this current school year. That would mean cuts that would have to be implemented for the second semester. And in fact, on Tuesday, I have to present a fiscal recovery plan required by the Ohio Department of Education, explaining how we would do that if it was necessary. And the costs associated with COVID-19 have resulted in even more financial need and uncertainty, as I'm sure you can appreciate. We have outfitted every single student with a device, either a tablet or a laptop, hotspots and other access to the internet, PPE, and many other things that have already cost the district well over $22 million, and we estimate another $20 million yet this year. Some common questions about the levy are accountability. This is a term-limited levy, which allows us to again come back to voters. That has been our continuing commitment for accountability. And affordability. And again, the levy will cost the average homeowner in Cleveland $7 a month. I am a homeowner in Cleveland. My home is a higher than average home, and it will cost me about $15 a month. The levy will pay for several things. The first is to continue to preserve and update the programming that has given us these results. It will also pay for the continued improvement on test scores and graduation rates. It'll allow us to keep reasonable class sizes and high quality teachers and not go back to the 40 to 45 kids in a classroom pre-2012. It will allow us to continue to maintain this new one-to-one technology and internet connectivity to make our students digitally connected like their peers. And it will allow us to continue to accelerate preparing students for colleges and for careers with a big body of work that the Cleveland Foundation and many of our partners have been working on for students who do not plan to go to a formal post-secondary education. What's at risk is 12% of the district's net operating budget, and the implications of that will be significant additional school closures, large numbers of employee layoffs, and significant program cuts, essentially putting us back to where we were in 2011 before the levy passed for the first time. So thank you again for inviting me to share a bit about the levy. It is now my pleasure to introduce a message from Chris Rodriguez. Chris is a 2019 graduate from John Marshall Civic and Business High School and is a current freshman at Kent State University on his Say Yes to Education scholarship.
Hello, community. My name is Christopher Rodriguez. I am a Cleveland resident, and I am an alumni of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. This year, I turned 18, which means I can finally vote and use my voice to empower the future. I will be voting for issue 68 to keep Cleveland kids moving ahead. As a previous student of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and valedictorian of my class, I value the quality education I receive and the faculty and staff who helped me reach my full potential. CMSD is proof that once we are a community, we are always a community. With an outstanding graduation rate that reached another record high of 80.1%, the district is striving, and we must continue to support our educational institutions. Even in the midst of a pandemic, everyone is working hard. Issue 68 must pass in order to keep Cleveland kids moving ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juan Galliano. I'm a project consultant at
What was my almost name? Lauren.
I'm a project consultant at the Cleveland Foundation, and I will be emceeing the program for today. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Joseph Mead, who's assistant professor at Cleveland State University.
Thank you, everyone. I'm here to tell you what you can and cannot do as a nonprofit to support this levy. And mostly I will tell you that you can support this levy. If you take nothing else away from what I am telling you today, that should be it. And I'm speaking to you, assuming that I'm speaking to 501c3 tax-exempt organizations. If you are exempt under another designation of the tax code, you have different rules that will apply to you. And I'm also assuming that you are a public charity and not a church. Public charity will be most of you if you receive donations from a large group of people or you have a variety of revenue streams, unless you're a family foundation. So assuming that you fit in that criteria, as I assume most of you do, you are probably aware that you have some limits on the sort of expenditures that you can make. You are allowed as a 501c3 organization to advocate to your heart's desire consistent with your mission. There are no limits on communications that don't mention a specific ballot initiative or legislation. You are permitted, let me be clear, you are permitted to also make communications expenditures and efforts to influence the passage of a specific ballot measure or piece of legislation. There are some limits that you have to follow and record keeping that you have to comply with, but that should not deter you from lobbying when it's consistent with your mission. The one thing you can't do is support or oppose a candidate for public office. That's not an issue here and I won't discuss it. So some of the things that you can do, you can hold meetings to discuss issue 68, strategy meetings, you can host events when it's safe to do so. You can have direct contact with potential voters door to door or in public spaces. You can make a donation to organizations that are working on the levy and so on. The limits that you have will depend on whether you, as your organization, has made the 501H election, which is done by filing Form 5768. If you have made this election, which many of your organizations will have done, you must comply with specific dollar limits on how much money you spend on the ballot initiative. These are fairly generous. So if your organization spends $1 million a year, you can spend $100,000 plus 15% over the amount over $500,000 on the ballot measure. If you have not made a 501H election, the test is a little less clear, and you have to keep closer track and reporting at the end on your Form 990 of the expenditures that you make and the volunteer time that you deploy. The bottom line, though, is there are lots of options for you to support the levy, and your tax-exempt status should not get in the way. If you need further resources, I suggest boulderadvocacy.org or nonprofitvote.org or councilofnonprofits.org. Thanks.
Thank you, Joseph, for sharing those words. Now I'd like to turn it over to Daryl Torbert, Vice President of Strategy at Burgess & Burgess.
Juan, thanks for having me here today. And Professor Mead, thank you for that explanation on what 501c3s and nonprofits can do to assist Issue 68. I'm going to speak briefly on, give you some updates on the campaign, and to piggyback on what Professor Mead says, give you some other ways that you will be able to support Issue 68 and the Cleveland schools moving forward. We know that more than ever, this election is unlike any other election in our lifetime. We're facing unprecedented issues and challenges from the federal level down to the local level. COVID is changing everything, including our elections. But even in this environment, we know that our Cleveland schools in Issue 68 are more important than ever. So as I said earlier, I'm just going to piggyback on Professor Mead and tell you just a few ways we can help with Issue 68. So I'm going to talk just briefly about what this election looks like and how it might be different from elections in the past. We always know that in a presidential general election that the electorate skews much younger. You got folks who typically do not vote in elections who will come out and vote in 2020, 16, any other presidential year. There are so many folks, unfortunately, who think that the only time that we vote is on the presidential level. We've got some work that we will be doing, all of us collectively, to inform folks that this is something we need to do every year, but we're specifically focused on this year right now. The people that we're looking to speak with this year are anyone who's voted in at least one of the last 4 general elections, plus people who have newly registered to vote since last year's election. Anywhere in the neighborhood of 140 to 150,000 ballots that were cast. But I will tell you, with the vast increase in early voting, that number could potentially go up. We don't know what a election day in person is going to look like. We know that in the spring, election day was temporarily postponed. It's our hope that we don't deal with that this year, but we have to get our votes or our supporters to request ballots as early as possible to be sure that their votes will count this year. Initially, we assumed that there were going to be at least 60 to 80% of people who were going to vote early, either by mail or going down to the Board of Elections to cast their votes. That number could increase as well. I can tell you that as of earlier today, we've had 61,000 people in the city of Cleveland alone. And I know that CMSD includes much more than the city of Cleveland, but with the city of Cleveland being the bigger portion of the voter turnout, we've got 61,000 people who have requested ballots. That is almost 15% higher than what we saw in 2016. At that point, not at that point, but for the duration of the election, only 50,000 people requested an early ballot or voted in person at the Board of Elections. So there's a lot of excitement about voting early, and we want to keep on rationing up that support and make sure those folks who are voting in person and requesting those ballots are voting for Issue 68. There's 2 campaigns that we're running here. We typically run what we call a voter ID campaign. This is when we have grassroots folks who are going door to door, making phone calls, social media, or surveys asking people if they're going to support an issue. We are still conducting that portion of the campaign, with the exception of not going through or from door to door asking folks if they're going to vote for the issue. We're doing our ID primarily by phone banks and some social media requests as well. When you see the word chasing, the second bullet point here, that's just a term that we use to get a list of people who have voted or requested an early ballot. And what we do with those folks is we get their name, their address, we send them a piece of mail, or we give them a phone call, or we send them a text message asking them to vote for Issue 68 and talk about the importance of the campaign. You're also going to see an organized grassroots campaign, which I'm going to talk about on the next page, show you some of the folks that we have leading various roles here. As you should be beginning to see media about Issue 68, bulk direct mail, our first piece of mail to our target began hitting last week or arriving in mailboxes last week. You're going to see TV as we progress through the campaign, not yet, but within the last 2 weeks or so, we're looking to have TV ads that could be up and running. You may have begun to hear radio ads about the issue. Digital ads on cleveland.com and other news sites are going to implore you to vote for Issue 68 and its importance to our schools. Outdoor meaning billboards. We've got about 16 billboards, not about, but exactly 16 billboards around the school district. And we've got tons of yard signs that are asking people to vote for Issue 68. Last part of this being online advertising, which is a combination of the digital that I mentioned earlier and targeted ads to folks that we know are very likely to vote. So the grassroots campaign, we've got a smaller staff than we have in most elections because we can't do as much work. We're relying on digital and online communication much more so than we've done in the past. Our key workers are working in the areas of events and speakers bureaus. That specifically is about virtual and Zoom meetings. If we get word about a Zoom meeting and we can plug in one of our volunteers, we have them speaking on behalf of Issue 68 there. We've got an early voting and get out the vote coordinator who's typically or only responsible for sending the list of early voters to our mail houses and our volunteers so that we can do communication with them and urge them to vote for us. Visibility and signs, that's just yard signs. We've got people or a team of 2 folks that are going around just specifically to install yard signs in people's homes. Phone banks, which are teachers with Cleveland Teachers Union and other volunteers are taking the lead on making phone calls to people that we know are likely to vote. Earned media, we know that in this environment, cleveland.com, kyc.com, ABC, not ABC, but WEWS and the other local news stations, people are going to those sites for more and more information. And lastly, endorsements and social media. We've got a team that is working to put out information on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, be it the videos that we've already seen, videos that are soon to come in about why folks are voting for Issue 68 and what you can do to support the campaign. Lastly, as I said earlier, here are the ways that we can get your help right now. As Professor Mead said, you are able to make a contribution. We ask that you visit our website at keepclekidsmovingahead.com to make a contribution to support the campaign. We also have 10,000 yard signs with more signs coming in soon, and we need homes for those yard signs. We'd ask if you would consider serving as a distribution site for those signs, or even taking 25 to 50 signs from our teachers and our volunteers are walking every Saturday in targeted neighborhoods across the city. We'd ask if you can sign up to volunteer to walk with them on Saturdays. We typically walk from 10 a.m. till about 12 to 1 p.m. And we feed our volunteers afterwards. So if you're looking for a quick lunch, come out and walk with us on Saturdays. We're literally just dropping literature at targeted homes to ask folks to vote for 68. You can record a video to show your support of Issue 68 in the Cleveland schools. As you've seen from Antoine's video and Chris's video, we're looking for something very simple, what Cleveland schools and Issue 68 mean to you and why people should vote for it. Lastly, the easiest thing we can ask you to do is to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We have all of these requests at our website. Once again, please visit us at keepclekidsmovingahead.com. So Juan, thanks once again for allowing me to share that information. I will turn the presentation back over to you.
Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate you sharing. And we have a short video of Judith Ryder, who will be sharing an example of what it looks like to make an endorsement video.
Hi, I'm Judith Ryder. On behalf of all of us at Cleveland Arts Education Consortium, I'm urging you to vote yes for Issue 68. Approval will help equip teachers and students and strengthen and build critical internet and tech resources for families, and so much more. We are proud of CMSD's ever-growing achievements and all that is being done to serve and benefit Cleveland families. Keep Cleveland kids moving forward. Vote yes for Issue 68. Thanks.
Well, with that, we have a couple of minutes left for some questions. If you haven't had a chance to send a question over yet, please consider doing so through the Q&A portion. But we have one question that has come in for Eric Gordon. And the question is, what would happen? What would happen if this levy did not pass? Like you mentioned, there would be some cuts, but what would that look like?
So if the levy doesn't pass, then we have to cut $30 million out of this school year's budget, and then $70 million, approximately $66 million each year going forward. That would mean we would have to do significant school closures, significant layoffs at all levels of the organization, and deep program cuts in things like our early childhood efforts that we've done so much in, athletics and extracurricular activities, programs like art, music, things that Judy was just talking about, transportation. It's really deep cuts to the services of programs that kids are currently receiving.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Had another question here for Daryl. Daryl, could you share about when people talk about the campaign, what are you encouraging them to say, especially for nonprofit leaders?
Oh, we want you to talk about the impact that Cleveland Schools, or CMSD, excuse me, has had on your organization, ways that you've helped the school, ways that you've increased the graduation rate, the attendance rate. We'd specifically like to hear how you've supported that and how a vote for issue 68 is going to allow your organization to continue to work with the district and improving the outlook, not only for our students, but for our community and our economy as a whole. So specifically, if you can share with us how you're assisting the campaign.
Sounds great. Another question came in for you, Daryl. How does someone go about getting a yard sign? And if people want to walk up to those Saturday morning events, how do they do so?
Okay, so if you visit our website, keepclekidsmovingahead.com, the volunteer section of the page, there you can sign up to walk and request a yard sign. We do have specific volunteers who will follow up with you, let you know the days, well, the times that we are walking, the locations we're walking, and collect your address and dispatch somebody to deliver that sign to you.
Sounds great, thank you. I guess this is the last question, and it's directed towards Eric. What has CMSD learned this year about equipping students for success? How will those lessons impact initiatives funded through issue 68?
So thank you to the person asking the question. I get the whole rest of our panel to describe everything we've learned. I'll pick one, and I would say that we are the single highest childhood poverty major city in the country. We are also, unfortunately, the single worst connected city in the country from a digital divide perspective. What we were able to do and what we will continue to do with issue 68 support is take a community that candidly we never thought we would be able to turn into a one-to-one student device, every student having a tablet or a laptop and working on those devices both at school, at home, and connected every single kid and family. And issue 68, part of the investment, will allow us to refresh a quarter of those devices every year, because devices have a 4-year shelf life, so that we can keep these kids and future kids connected.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric. We will be taking a pause now on questions and moving on to the next portion of our program, where we'll get to hear from nonprofit leaders in the community talking about what this levy means for their work and ways that they plan to educate their community about it. So I would like to just introduce their backgrounds and then turn it over to our facilitator. So we get to be joined by Lee Friedman, CEO of College Now, Zulma Zavala, CEO of East End Cleveland Neighborhood House, Terrence Ewell from Shoes and Clothes for Kids, and Erica Brown of Neighborhood Connections, working as the Community Network Manager for Training and Special Projects. And the facilitator will be Lawrence Daniel Caswell of Neighborhood Connections, working as the Field Coordinator for Cleveland Documenters. I'll turn it over to Lawrence now.
Thanks, Juan. Hey, I also just wanted to state that I am the parent of a CMSD student, and I'm also part of a group of CMSD parents trying to create a district-wide network of CMSD parents and caregivers. I'd like to really start with what's at stake with issue 68. I think we've heard from Eric and some other folks about what it would mean for CMSD directly, but I'm wondering, Zulma, if you mind if I could talk with you first. How do you currently, or how does East End Neighborhood House currently work with Cleveland Public Schools? And what would the failure of the levy, how would that affect that work and the sector in general?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am proud to say that we've been working with the Cleveland school system for at least over 30-some years in everything that we do. East End currently has 2 programs that services the community at large, with our early childhood program that has after school and summer programming, and also our National Foster Grandparent Program, which has 90-some volunteers in the school system, servicing over 300 students individually and over 600 in group form. Our work together is critical to making sure that all of our children succeed in their academic achievement. And our collaboration has been overall, again, critical to all the services that we provide, period, to our families. You know, I started in my journey about the same time that Eric Gordon did as in his role as CEO for the school system. And I will tell you that very transparently, we've been in the same rooms many occasions, advocating for our children and advocating for our families. And that's not often the case for folks who are grassroots level to be able to work with institutions side by side on behalf of the people that we service. This levy, like many of the levies that we've passed before in this county, is critical to continue the work that we do. I cannot imagine doing the work that we do in a silo form. I cannot imagine doing this work without the support of the entire community, the county. So it is really critical to the outcomes that thus far we've been able to meet, and hopefully be able to still meet some of those that are still needed to be met at the best level we can meet them, such as the technology connectivity for our families and children, especially during this critical time that we're facing with the pandemic.
Thanks, Alma. Appreciate that. Lee Friedman, what about you? How does College Now currently work with the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, and how would the levy failure affect that work?
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here because I don't think there's anything more important we're dealing with, at least locally right now. College Now has been working with the schools for 52 years, believe it or not. Started, you know, helping just a handful of kids, and now we really work to make sure our students are getting on a post-secondary path. Really, there's a couple things that I think would be really important for everyone here to understand. College Now is an effective organization. However, we had found over the last number of years that getting students through, high school and then on to post-secondary can be a challenge unless you really have strong partners. And so many of you on this call are strong partners, but not the least of which is CMSD, and a strong, well-funded CMSD, coupled with the new initiatives we've done with Say Yes to Education. And I know there was a question about where does Say Yes fit into the funding here. The funding for Say Yes is not, this levy does not fund Say Yes. The scholarship dollars are privately funded by a number of philanthropists led by many of the foundations on this call, the Cleveland Foundation, obviously. And the services that are part of the wraparound for Say Yes are funded by a consortium of community groups, including CMSD. The point here is simply that without a strong CMSD, the Say Yes theory of action and our ability to give scholarships to students so they can achieve their long-term dreams, whether that's technical school or getting a PhD, would be highly jeopardized by this kind of money being pulled out of the mainstream of everyday, operating costs. So I don't think there's anything, really that we'd be facing that would be more important. Every kid would get less. And I think that the trajectory the school system has been on over the years, which Eric so articulated very well, I think we'd be stopping progress in its tracks and potentially really taking steps back.
Every kid would get less. That says a lot.
Every kid would get less.
Yeah. Erica Brown, I'd like to hear about the work that Neighborhood Connections is doing, where I am your colleague there. A little bit about the work that Neighborhood Connections is doing with the Cleveland Public Schools students especially, and how this levy failing would impact that work.
Okay, so good afternoon. So my work at Neighborhood Connections supports the NeighborUp Network, and NeighborUp Network members include parents and caregivers, staff, and students of CMSD. So through our community network building strategy and our small grants program, we've been able to support parent groups, after and out of school time programs, and student and youth-led and focused groups and organizations. So schools are vitally important to our communities and the quality of life. So failure of this levy would immediately impact quality of life issues. Like Lee said, every child would immediately get less. And like Zul and Lee both said, collaboration is key and collaboration is really important. We focus on building relationships and maintaining relationships because that's the foundation of pretty much everything else that you need to get done, especially in a city like Cleveland. And without successful schools, without quality schools, without the ability to continue on the track that we're on, we would automatically be taking steps back. And the failure of the levy would mean that taking those steps back would mean less ability to support the things that improve quality of life in people's neighborhoods.
Thanks, Erica. I appreciate that.
Say, I'm also a CMSD parent.
Thanks, Erica. Terry Ewell, tell me about the work that Choose and Close for Kids does and how that work will be impacted by the failure of this levy of issue 68.
Thanks very much, and proud to be part of this group. We're in our 52nd year of serving kids in Cleveland, the greater Cleveland area. Help serve about 10 to 15,000 K through 8 students a year with new school clothing, shoes, school supplies. We help about 3,000 students, 3,000 teachers, excuse me, get new school supplies they can distribute in the classrooms. 28 neighborhood partners, east side, west side, and work a lot directly with CMSD. So we feel we've got a pretty good network to hear, see, and frankly even feel what's going on the ground and directly with those families who need help. We get a lot of help and guidance from Eric directly and his colleague Karen Thompson. We work with their attendance office. Our mission is focused on getting kids into school because they have the new things they need and stay in school. What others have talked about so far, I agree with 100%. The angle I want to remind everybody on, and I got some of this from a New York Times article about a month ago on the homelessness situation with students in New York City right now and how worse it has gotten just in the past 6 months, but how it has grown the last 6 years. We are convinced that if the levy doesn't pass, the situation for homeless students in Cleveland will continue to accelerate, exacerbate. And it makes it tougher then to reach those kids to get them the clothing and supplies and shoes and winter coats they need to get into school. We know once they get into school, they are taken care of. And we have seen the changes that Eric and his team have made that have made the schools a lot better. And we saw some of those statistics, particularly the high school graduation. So our concern is we'll still find a way to help those kids through our partners and through the schools, but the situation of homeless kids could increase dramatically if this levy doesn't pass, and that is our biggest concern.
Terry, I know you said that you'll still get help for those kids, but it really sounds like with the loss of that money, you will just have less access to those kids. Is that fair? Particularly those homeless CMSD students, if the levy fails?
It will be significantly more difficult. We work through our neighborhood partners who know those families well now because they know the housing in their districts, if you will. Mm-hmm. But as those families move and kind of become tough to track down, it will be a lot tougher then to get them the things they need. So we'll still have what they need. It's how we can get it to them that may become significantly more different than if they're not going to school because they don't have the new clothing or the supplies. They don't get all the other help that Eric and his team can bring them.
Great. Thanks, Terry. I appreciate that. So that's a little bit of a look at the risks of the failure of issue 68 of this levy passing in just a few weeks. You know, I say in just a few weeks, but really we're in the election right now. Folks have voted already. Folks are voting today. I believe the polls opened up yesterday for in-person voting. So we're in the middle of an election that will go until election day. So I'd like to spend the rest of the 10 minutes that we have here hearing about what we do about this. How do we plan to educate communities and the folks you serve about issue 68 to make a difference? And Erica, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you. How in your work as a community network builder at Neighborhood Connections, do you plan to educate folks and the people you serve about issue 68?
Okay, so what we currently do is that we are currently holding, hosting, and supporting virtual spaces. And these are spaces where community members can hold conversations, get and give good information around what's important to them. We also support the Cleveland Parent Leadership Network, which is a group of parents. It's formed by parents and caregivers, which is also all across the district, and it's people who are coming to share information and support each other. So our role in educating the community will be in continuing to support those spaces and making those available and making everything that make that conversation work for people. So to get the good information, to get the true and correct information, to support how people want to get out to the rest of their community, how people want to interact with their neighbors, how people want to be engaged. So supporting that and helping facilitate those conversations, helping teach people how to facilitate those additional conversations, providing space for that is the way that we'll be supporting and educating the community.
I'm wondering how much more difficult you think that work will be in this pandemic. I mean, obviously we're sort of in this, and Neighborhood Connections has done some sort of work in that space, having those sorts of events virtually. But how much more difficult will that work be in this pandemic?
So once again, some of the same good old fashioned stuff that has always worked still works. Phone calls still work. Knocking on somebody's door, even if you got to wear a mask and step back to the steps, on the porch. So talking to the community about ways that they can still educate each other, talking about how they can still hold these spaces. Even if you're not connected virtually to certain spaces, you can still make phone calls. Even if we have a Zoom phone call that's going on, or a Zoom group that's happening where people are coming to get that information, or coming to talk about it, you can still phone into that. You don't need to have access to a computer or other technology. So still making those things available and making it as accessible to as many people as possible will be the way that we're able to support educating the community.
Great. Thanks, Erica. I appreciate it. Zolma, how do you plan to educate the communities that you serve at East End Neighborhood House about issue 68, about getting this levy through?
Yeah, Lawrence, you know, at East End, we are consistently in the practice of Ubuntu, which basically means that we see each other in each other. So what matters to our parents matters to us. What matters to our children matters to us. So in our conversations from the very organic fact that we relate to one another as human beings, knowing that we have the same challenges and same goals and aspirations for our families, we're consistently speaking to our families. You know, through COVID, I don't know if you know, but East End has been open this entire time and done our best and the best precautions that we can to continue our connectivity with our families. So whether they're in their building getting services, whether we are reaching out to them by, like Erica said, from a window, from a driveway, from a porch, from wherever we can connect with families. I mean, it is just organically the way that we show up to make sure that our families are always connected. We also are in the very serious business of seeing our families, our advocates and leaders of their own lives for the things that they want for themselves and their families. So we're consistently always encouraging, developing, assisting and guiding their own leadership and advocacy to be able to speak on behalf of their children and families. We've gone as far as making sure that we help people register to vote, from our parents to our seniors, for the census. I mean, anywhere that we can connect to the people that we service, again, and seeing each other and each other, we're doing consistently and all the time. And it's the way we've done it for the past 113 years, and we will continue to do so that we can meet the collective goals that we need to meet.
Indeed, Ubuntu. Thank you, Zolma. I appreciate that. Terry, how is Shoes and Clothes for Kids doing outreach around, or how you plan to do outreach around issue 68?
We're in touch with our neighborhood partners, those 28 organizations, east side and west side of Cleveland. Through our distribution, we don't have direct contact with the families or the kids. We let CMSD and those orgs who know the families best and know what kids need best handle that. But we want to make sure those 28 neighborhood partners have all the information they need, either through us or through Daryl. My goal is to make sure Daryl doesn't get a nap until mid-November, and then he can sleep. And keep everybody at Burgess and Burgess busy as can be. But we'll use our neighborhood partners. Our team has been emailing stuff out to our stakeholders, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure this passes. Our mission's all about kids. Everybody who's on here today, it's all about the kids and everything we can do. Man, I'd rather put the extra time and effort in now, because if this does not pass, we don't want to think about the time and effort we're going to have to make just to get back to where we were.
Yep, indeed. Indeed. Lee Friedman, I'd like to close out this panel conversation with you, and I put the same question to you. How does College Now plan to do outreach and communicate with the folks you serve about issue 68?
Well, many of what you've heard is a lot of what we're doing. Of course, social media, reaching out to our constituents, using our advisors in schools. I know Say Yes is using the family support specialist. We've also been really intentional about thinking about our alumni. And what I mean by that is, who have we served or their parents over the course of many years? So everybody, all of our groups here have people we've served who have moved on to become adults or moved through your program or whatever it is. And we are really looking at any way we can communicate with that as well. What we know, and I think all my colleagues on this call know, is that not-for-profit organizations are always a trusted source for families. They hear it better from us because they see a more objectivity than they do necessarily from government or something like that. So we're covering all those bases. We've had great, amazing community partners on this call that help us, and we'll be connecting. If there's something we can do to help any of you, we would love to do that, and we will come back to you. We're also using our board of trustees. Not all of them vote in Cleveland, but many of them are being asked for money right now. Mm-hmm. Many of these companies are being asked for money, and sometimes it's a disconnect, why they need to do this. And we are making a big push to ask them to donate, if not personally, through their companies, and to talk it up with their constituents that are voters in the city of Cleveland. And not to forget our college kids too, the kids that we're serving in college, many of whom are voting for the first time or the second time or something like that. And so we're not leaving, that, without effort as well.
Great. That's Lee Friedman of College Now, also joining us for this panel conversation. Zulma Zabala of East End Neighborhood House, Terrence Ewell of Shoes and Clothes for Kids, and Erica Brown, Community Network Manager at Neighborhood Connections. I'm Lawrence Daniel Caswell of Cleveland Documenters at Neighborhood Connections. I'd like to pass it back to Juan. Thank you all for joining us for this panel conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you to all the panelists, facilitators, and speakers who have presented. This has been a great conversation so far. We have a closing charge that will be happening shortly, but before that, we want to share a video of a partner refugee response and how they plan to educate their membership about Issue 68.
As November approaches, many Clevelanders are preparing to vote in the upcoming election. In this video, we will help citizens become informed voters by discussing how to vote and what we will be voting on. Our upcoming election will take place on November 3rd. Voters can vote at their assigned polling station on Election Day, vote early in person at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections, or complete a mail-in ballot. When voting in person on Election Day, your voting station will be located in your neighborhood. Make sure you confirm where you're assigned to vote by contacting the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. On Election Day, voting starts at 6:30 a.m., and as long as you're in line before the polling hours end at 7:30 p.m., you will be able to vote. Early in-person voting is available at the Board of Elections on weekdays through November 2nd, and will be available on weekends starting on October 24th. When voting in Ohio, bring a state identification, such as a state ID or a driver's license, and wear a mask. Once you get into your voting location, ask an election official for a ballot, sign your name, and fill out your selections. Mail-in ballots are available and have started being distributed. You can request one until October 31st by contacting the Board of Elections. Mail-in ballots must be postmarked by the day before the election, November 2nd, to be counted. Voters should return mail-in ballots as soon as possible. You can drop your ballot off at the Board of Elections in person by November 3rd. If you are sending your ballot back, attach 3 stamps before mailing. In the city of Cleveland, we will vote on different elected officials and issues. For example, President, Congress representatives, state Supreme Court and local judges, state representatives, and levies such as Issue 68. Issue 68 will directly impact public schools in Cleveland. CMSD is trying to renew the levy and provide a modest increase to preserve and update quality programs, improve test scores and graduation rates, keep good teachers, add technology, and prepare all students for college and their careers. Issue 68 will be the last issue on the ballot and will appear after the choices for elected officials. In 2012, CMSD had the lowest educational rating in Ohio. Today, CMSD schools are among the fastest improving in Ohio due to support like the levy in Issue 68. Voting is one of the most important rights and responsibilities that U.S. citizens have. Nobody can force a citizen to vote, but many of us do vote because it allows us to tell the government what we want our communities to look like. When we vote, we have a say in what services we want, how much we want to pay in taxes, and who represents us in government. By understanding the upcoming ballot, you will be an informed voter that makes sure your vote is counted and your voice is heard. If you have any questions about the upcoming election, contact the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections.
We thank everyone for joining us for the town hall today and for taking this time during lunch to hear about issue 68. We have two more closing words. We'll hear briefly from Daryl and Eric Gordon, and we'll close out with a video. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us this lunchtime.
Thanks again, Juan. I want to implore everyone, early voting has started. Election day is here already. Though we say November 3rd is election day, let's be real, it started on this past Tuesday. The real in-person election day is only 26 days away, but as I said earlier, we've got 61,000 people who have already requested votes here in the Cleveland School District. We need you to be one of those people who are also requesting your vote. Get in that vote for issue 68, keep our kids moving ahead. Our students need your vote, our teachers, our community as a whole. This is not just about education, this is about the future of our city. As I tell people this all the time, I'm a Collinwood High School graduate. I love my alma mater, I love this school district. It's incumbent on all of us to stand up, take a stand for our high schools, our alma maters, but more importantly for our students and our children who are continuing in those schools and those buildings after we're done. To request your early ballot, visit 443vote.com, or you can call 216-443-8683. You can also get those links at our website, keepclekidsmovingahead.com. So thank you for allowing us to speak with you today. Thank you for your support. Eric, I'll turn it over to you for your last closing words, sir.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today. I am a Cleveland resident, homeowner, and taxpayer, and I will be voting for issue 68. Outside of my workday, I will also be advocating and ask you to join us outside of your workday to help us to continue to advocate. But you can also reach out to me specifically during my workday to join your meetings to educate people on issue 68. And that's another way that you can be helpful. So again, thank you to everybody for being here, for learning about issue 68 and doing what you can to support our kids. Speaking of our kids, I want to close today to show you just a glimpse of what remote learning looks like in the Cleveland School District and why it's so important for us to pass this issue. This video is our All City Arts High School Choir. They created this video of Nicki Minaj's Moment for Life for our graduation ceremonies, our distance graduation parades last spring. So please enjoy.
Graduation class of 2020. You did it. You beat the odds. Stars in the skies. I am no longer trying to survive. I believe that life is a prize, but to live doesn't mean you're alive. Don't worry about me and who I fire. I get what I desire. It's my empire, and yes, I call the shots. I am the umpire. I stick a holy water upon the vampire. This very moment I'm king, and this very moment I slay Goliath with the sling. This very moment I bring, put that on everything. That I will retire with the ring, and I will retire with the crown. Yes, no, I'm not lucky, I'm blessed. Yes, clap for the heavyweight champ, me. But I couldn't do that all alone. We, young money crazy, grew up rotten daisy. Southside Jamaica, Queens, and it's crazy. Cause I'm still hood, Hollywood couldn't change me. Shout out to my haters, sorry that you couldn't phase me. And being cocky, we just vindicated. Let's believe that when we done this moment, we be syndicated. I don't know. This night just remind me of everything they deprived me of. Put your drinks up. This is celebration every time we link up. Now we done did everything they could think of. Great is what we on the brink. I wish that I could have this I wish that I could have this moment, but I can't have this moment. I just want this moment. I just want this moment. I just feel so alive. I can't have this moment. I just want this moment. I just want this moment. I can't have this moment. I can't have